Welcome to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, where we dive deep into the intersection of career, family, and finances. Learn the mindsets, tips, and strategies to help you on your personal journey to build a life of abundance and purpose for you and your family. Now here's your host, Aaron Amin. Welcome back to another episode of the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Haydynn Fike. At only 23 years old, Hayden has already made some huge moves in his investing career, having recently partnered up as the chief operator of a 72-unit self-storage facility. Hayden is also a super connector. He runs a podcast called The Art of Connecting, and he is one of the most genuine, authentic, and driven individuals I have ever met. We dive deep into his backstory, the motivation behind his journey, and the advice he'd give any investor looking to build their dream life and make a huge impact. You are going to love this episode. Let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Haydynn Fike. Hayden and I are in a mastermind together, the Action Academy. He's one of the first members I talked to, and I was instantly impressed. He's a young guy, but you wouldn't know it by talking to him. He's got a ton of experience already and really getting out there and mixing it up. So Hayden, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself in your own words?
Yeah, thank you for that intro. Again, my name's Haydynn Fike. I grew up in Nashville most of my life, so I lived there for about 18 years. I was a homeschool kid. I was homeschooled all of the years of school with the exception of first and second grade. And I learned a lot through that experience of being homeschooled. It really taught me how to relate to people, connect to people, because there's that stigma of the awkward homeschooler. But in my personal experience, a lot of the people that I end up meeting that were homeschooled end up being like really outgoing people because they have to be. That journey started, ended up moving to Chattanooga, Tennessee about 5 years ago to go to college, the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. I went to school there for 4 years. Somehow I made it out in 4 years and it didn't take more than that. And I graduated from there with a bachelor's in business management. And since finishing college in May, I've started traveling a lot. I've been to Europe, Costa Rica, Poland. Poland's in Europe. But I've been traveling a lot and have really leaned into networking and started a brand called The Art of Connecting.
Leaned in is a light way of saying that. You've leaned in all the way. You're all over the place. You're appearing in networking events all over your region. You've spun up your own real estate meetup. You're in the mastermind we're in. And frankly, every time I open up my Facebook page, I see you posting something new and exciting. And I'm even going to brag on you as well. You just hosted your own meetup this past weekend in Nashville. So like we can dig into all that, right? But you going back to what you said, how you were homeschooled and that actually forced you to learn how to connect with people because you didn't necessarily have it baked into your day-to-day connecting with other people your age. Like what made you so social? Because I would not assume that being homeschooled would wire you that way, but there must have been some sort of internal motivation that made you seek that connection.
Yeah, that's a great question. So since I've been a kid, I have always had that aspect of I'm more interested in talking to the adults than the kids. So even when I was probably like 7, 8 years old, the kids my age would be playing with Legos and race cars. And I did a little bit of that, but I was also more interested in speaking to the adults. So what do you do for work? Oh, how does a fire truck work? Or trying to learn how the world works. And I also, when I was a kid, I loved to take things apart, but not put them back together. So I would always like get these home phones that people would be throwing away and take them home and all this little weird stuff that I was just wired to always be curious and wonder how the world works. How does the fire alarm system work? How does this, that, and the other, what makes it function? And so that led me to, I'm not going to find that out with the people that I'm around. I'd have to ask the people who have been around longer.
Makes sense. And so always looking to connect with people a few steps ahead of you on the journey that you want to be on. That's a great way to go about learning anything, but starting especially at an early age. I was similar. I always liked to be at the adult table, not because I wanted to feel like an adult, because I genuinely enjoyed learning from them. And in my journey, my parents were real estate investors too. I didn't learn as much about it in real time, like when I was growing up, as I would have liked to, but I think observing like adult behavior and people starting businesses and navigating their careers. It teaches you a lot by osmosis, and especially if you're willing to pay attention. And like you said, break away from the traditional kid activities sometimes. But you went to school for 4 years at a university. I know you worked, I believe, at least one, if not two jobs coming
I
out
had
of.
12 jobs. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So why don't you run us through what the progression was from a job and career standpoint, and then also where you are right now. What do you do with your time?
Okay. Oh boy. Okay. So I'm going to try to shorten this as much as we can because, like I said, my resume, I don't need my resume anymore. But if you were to get my resume, it's a solid 2 pages now. But I've worked in a variety of different industries, going with that curiosity of wondering how the world works. I also was curious with my jobs. What would it be like to work in this industry or that industry? And instead of just thinking about it, I just did it. So I've worked as a car salesperson at a Buick GMC Cadillac dealership and a Mazda dealership. I worked as a lot attendant before that at those dealerships. So that meant that I was moving inventory, managing the inventory, washing the cars as they sold, going and getting the managers blizzards if they wanted them from Dairy Queen, whatever the dealership needed. I worked at Chick-fil-A for 4.5 years. I started there when I was 15 years old as a team member, quickly worked my way up to be a team leader, which was the assistant management position at that location. And then after I turned 18, I started traveling for Chick-fil-A corporate, opening up stores across the country. So I worked in Evansville, Indiana, New York, and Farmingdale, New York, and then in Maryland in 2 different locations and several Nashville locations as well. And then I also sold life insurance for a little bit. So I have a life and health license. Don't use that anymore. Spend a lot of time to get that for a lot of nothing. That was in a multi-level marketing company. So learned a lot about those as well. And then after the life insurance thing, I also worked at 2 different Christian Brothers automotives. So I worked at Christian Brothers Automotive in Mount Juliet and Hickson, Tennessee, as a service advisor there. So really making sure the customer experience is out of the park for our customers, loving on people, just trying to spread the word of the good news, but also repairing cars at the same time. It's a really cool company. And then after that, I started working in a food tour business. And so me and the owner of that food tour company worked together every day. Somewhere in between there, I worked at a hotel too. So like I said, it's all over the place, the gamut of industries. And it's confusing for me because I can never remember where was I working at that point. It's always been somewhere different.
So the common theme there is service, though, right? It's different types of service, different types of hospitality. And I'm sure just listening to you rattle off all those different places, the connection point is the customer, right? You have to serve the customer. You have to understand the customer. You have to create a positive experience. In order to do that, you have to connect. You have to find a point of connection. And so again, I think it's so interesting. You mentioned that homeschooling taught you to seek connection, and the fact that it swung so far toward now your entire brand is connection. It's just an interesting contrast. And I wonder, even doubling way back. So homeschooling, did you like it?
I loved it. Yeah. And homeschooling also taught me service. When I was a kid, we went to what's called a co-op. So you come together in a group, and so that's how I met people. It wasn't just like I sat in my room and looked at books. We went to 2 co-ops a week. So they're completely separate groups. And my mom, she helped set up the school. So I would go and help move tables and move chairs and mop. And in the co-op, every parent has a responsibility to volunteer to make it run, basically. So I saw my mom from a young age volunteering and showing up and running preschools and things like that. And that really taught me how important service is. I was always taught as a kid, you shouldn't have to be asked to get up to go and help somebody. Go and help. Don't wait to be asked. And so that carried over into the Chick-fil-A aspect of the my pleasure. Service is king there, making sure that every experience is great. And I just try to carry that in to every relationship that I meet people with. But answering your question about did I like homeschooling? Absolutely. Homeschooling opened up so many opportunities for me. I was working 25 to 35 hours a week in high school, which allowed me to basically be like a stud in high school. I had 4 cards at any given time, and it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I know your work ethic is very clear. My wife and I actually talk about this often. We have a daughter. We have a 2-year-old daughter, and then we have twins that are about to come any day now, probably by the time this episode drops. But we talk about how we want our kids to have that work ethic and have them want to engage and want to start working early, want to start understanding what it's like to participate in society on any level, right? Just be out there and know how to meet people and talk to people, ask good questions. It's just so many skills. And I think even though it took you a minute to rattle through all those jobs, that diversity of experience is incredibly important. It's one of the things I talk about on the show a lot too, is like the whole hybrid real estate professional brand is based around the idea that we all have skills trapped in our previous experience that we sometimes don't acknowledge, but they play an important role in enabling us as investors and professionals. Your Chick-fil-A experience will likely serve you 20 years from now. I know you already feel that way, right? But I think sometimes we fail to recognize the unlock and skills that we have from past chapters. And so I love talking about some of the earlier life, earlier career stuff. Okay, so what does a day in Hayden's life look like today?
Every day is a little bit different. So my life is run off Google Calendar, and I've got to host talks releasing soon to talk about some of the tools that I use to plan out my days. But I'd say probably about 70 to 80% of my days are spent either connecting with people or reaching out to people to see if they want to go and get coffee or connect online or podcasting. So currently I invest in real estate. So I've got a 75 unit self-storage facility. So like this morning, I've got it here actually. I was printing out one of the leases for me to go and deliver to one of my customers. Maybe my morning starts with that. Like I was looking over sign designs to go and put in our facility and getting the marketing person to get the logo corrected to go on our sign. Yesterday, it was sitting in the cigar lounge talking about a project that I'm looking at with a contractor that I've become friends with from there. The day before that, it was looking at a potential flip house. And yesterday was like analyzation of no, this isn't going to work. Like it's not going to make the money and it's going to be a suck of my time. So it's really difficult to know what each day is going to be. And then some weeks it's like tomorrow I'm traveling to go meet with Doug McCarty. So I'm going to drive out to Costa, Tennessee, which is close to Savannah, which Savannah is close to Memphis. So it's like driving 4 hours to go hang out with him tomorrow. Every day is a little different.
Yeah, I love that. And so with that, being the connector you are, you meet people across a number of different, I'm sure you still meet people outside of real estate. And it feels like shiny object syndrome would be really hard to deal with when I know you and you have an authentic desire to connect to people. I remember you texted me the other day introducing me to someone in the music industry, which I love, right? Because that's something I don't get to talk about as much anymore. But like you're meeting people across all these different areas. And so how do you continue to do that, but also stay focused on what your objectives are? And then let me actually give a part two to that. What are your objectives? What are you trying to do right now?
So I'll start with my objectives and work backwards from there. So my goal is to get 200 more units of self-storage by the end of this year under contract. And so that involves looking at deals, telling people I'm in storage, posting about my storage all the time, and telling everyone I meet, hey, if you find any storage deals, send them my way. And so just this morning, I had 3 people send me over deals. So that's like objective for me as far as business goes. And that's going to create the cash flow to be able to actually like fund all of the things I'm doing, because right now it's a lot going out and a trickle coming in. And that's just the business entrepreneur, like when you're getting started, that's how it is. And then that part, so the first part of asking, how do you avoid shiny object syndrome? I struggled with this for a long time. I didn't know what asset class I wanted to go into. I bought my first single family property, and I did that, I guess, about 5 or 6 months ago. And I posted in the group and I was like, I want to get 3 more single family properties by I think it was end of Q2 or Q3. I can't remember which one it was. And I was in a goal setting session with Brian Lubin, both of our mentor and the leader of our mastermind. And he was like, dude, you know exactly what you need to do to get to 12 units. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I do. So I set my goal from 3 single family houses to a 12 unit apartment complex, or 12 to 24 units, because it's like the sweet spot for lending and getting a mom and pop, but isn't looking at by the big boys. Nonetheless, so I set my goal to that. I started SI Network. I network all the time, every day. I'm always going to some kind of coffee meeting, some kind of founders forum, networking meeting, real estate meetup, whatever it is, pretty much every day, minus the weekends, I'm going to something. And I started telling people this goal. And my business partner said, hey, I've got a tax problem. Why don't we partner up on a deal? I'll fund it. You find the deal. Like, sweet. Sounds good. So I started looking for deals, and I was really focused on multifamily, not really looking at other things because that was what I had set my sight on. And then he posted on Facebook, does anyone know any junk cleaning businesses? And so I texted him right away, and I was like, hey, I don't really know any junk cleaning businesses, but let me see if I can figure this out for you. And so he was like, all right, cool, whatever. And texted a friend who was a GC and got my general contractor there. I managed the project, made sure everything was going well. And we got the 6,500 square foot mansion cleaned out within 2 days. And so that started our relationship. And in between there, Dan had a deal that he had under contract. His partner and him ended up falling out and didn't fall out of contract. The partner didn't work out. And he called me and said, Hayden, would you want to partner on a self-storage facility? I'll give you 10% and you operate it. And I was like, yes. So that's like, self-storage became my one thing because of that opportunity that came through the networking. It wasn't always my one thing, and it's still, I wouldn't necessarily say my one thing. It's one of the things. And so but my mentality on it is I'm learning self-storage anyways. I may as well go bigger. If I've got to learn the lesson on 75 units, why can't I learn the lesson on 275?
No, I love that. And I watched that come together in real time, right? We share a lot of updates within our group. And so I think we all see each other's once a week. We post what our wins are, what we've worked on, what kind of action we've taken. And one thing that you and I both do is we take a lot of action, right? And sometimes it's like you said, before you got that call, hey, you want to do a 10%, ownership in exchange for operating this facility. You didn't know that phone call was going to come, but you were ready for it. And that was the point, right? Like when you were in a position to take action, you were building a network, and you were just open, both literally and figuratively, to opportunities. And as a result, it was only a matter of time. And now that you got some of that initial experience, like I remember reading one of your posts, okay, we're taking over this thing. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had to go call every single tenant and do some sort of transition, handover, maybe even meet them. Like you held up that lease earlier. There was a lot of work. It wasn't just, hey, let me like sign up and I'll get 10%. It was like, no, like this became a job.
Yeah.
But in doing so, I'm sure you learned all the motions that go along with that. And we have access to a lot of great mentors. But what was that experience like? So you got the phone call. He said, I'll give you 10% if you operate it. What happened next?
Yeah. So it's really interesting at the timing of it too. So he said yes, or he said, I'll give you 10%. And I said yes. And we were under contract at that point. I think we were closing in about a month. And I was leaving for Costa Rica in a week and a half or 2 weeks for the Action Academy Costa Rica trip, which is where me and Aaron met each other in person. And I said yes. And I was like, okay, cool. I don't know what I'm doing. So I really leaned on Ben Call and some of my other storage mentors that I have within the group, asking like, what do I do? Because neither one of us have ever bought a storage facility. And really, there wasn't much that happened before we closed. Dan was handling all the money side of things and the contractual things. I was doing a little bit of research, trying to get us set up onto our software. We didn't get our software set up until like after we had closed, which is something that I learned. You get your software set up and the people integrated before you even close, because if you don't do that, it puts you a month behind as far as collecting rent. Anyways, yeah, it wasn't much. I went to Costa Rica and I was very intentional. That trip was a reset for me, close of a chapter and an opening of a new one. And I knew that I needed to take some time to not be on my computer all the time, because that's the like cycle I had gotten into, was always on my computer, always on my phone. So I went to Costa Rica and just tuned out for really almost 2 weeks. And I come back, we closed 2 or 3 weeks after I got back from Costa Rica. And that was when the real work started.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. And as someone who has so many irons in the fire at any given point, was it hard to then shift and focus so much of your time on the storage deal? Because I'm sure, knowing you have 100 different feelers out, exploring all these opportunities, and then this one came along and all of a sudden started monopolizing a good portion of your time. So like, how'd you handle that?
I would say no, not really. So my schedule is always very fluid. So I can say yes to a lot of things. And that's always my goal. Like I got invited to go to Puerto Rico for Thanksgiving and I'm kicking myself because I said yes to dog sit for someone. So I like locked myself into Chattanooga for this time period. And then I got an invite to go to Colorado for a week and stay for free. And I'm like, dang it. Why did I say yes to dog sit? I try to avoid things like that. And this is like my lesson that I learned. Don't say yes to dog sit for people because it's not worth the $70 a night that I'm going to make because I'm losing out on opportunity to go somewhere. So that being said, with everything that I do, I have full control over my schedule. I'll never have another W-2 job in my life because I am in full control of my schedule. If I don't want to work a day, I can tell my business partner, hey, I'm out of town next weekend. And either she or some of our employees pick up that slack or the business doesn't operate. And that's how it works. So that allows me to be able to say yes to these things like the storage facility. I was also trying to wholesale at that time, wholesale houses. And as soon as I got the storage facility, I was like, I have too much on my plate. I forgot to wish my mom happy birthday. And I was like, this is too much. I need to cut something out. And so reached out to my wholesaling business partners and was like, hey, I can't do this anymore. If y'all need me to go like tour a property, I can do it, but I can't be taking the phone calls. I can't be analyzing deals because this is taking away from my mental capacity. So you really I just have to evaluate with all the irons that I have, like, okay, I need to allocate this much time for this and this much time for this, and then outsource with hiring Annette, who edits both of our podcasts, and just trying to figure out how I can make life a little bit easier with help.
Totally fair, man. And I love the fluid schedule idea, right? Like I still work a W-2. I have to find odd pockets of time. I also have one kid going on 3. And so, yeah, I do not have fluidity in my schedule. And so that's a real competitive advantage you have, right? I know we didn't mention your age yet, and I try not to fixate too much on age, but you are 23 years old and you are, driven, you have that freedom, you have that flexibility, you don't have kids yet, and you got the drive. And I just think that these few years, I don't know if you plan to have kids at some point, but these years, early years of hustle and planting seeds, by the time you get to the point of potentially having a family, like you're going to have whatever lifestyle you want. You already do in some ways, but just as these seeds grow, that flexibility that so many people desire, you will likely already have. So you mentioned you missed your mom's birthday. And one of the things that struck me so hard was you shared something in our community. And listeners, I did ask his permission before I decided to ask this question, but you wrote a note to them. And it was a really strong statement of what you plan to do to help your family, provide for them, give them opportunities. It was super heartfelt and detailed. And I loved it. I just want to know, like, what possessed you to write that? You made some promises in there, and I don't know if you are willing to share some of those. I don't mean promises like, oh, I'm 100% going to do this. It's more just like, these are my goals for you, my family. So can you share, just about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in Nashville in my parents' house, and every time I go to Nashville, I crash there because why wouldn't you? It's actually really convenient because they're so helpful in helping me with my travel. They always drop me off, pick me up at the airport. They cat sit for me. So when I was writing this letter, I think I was just sitting there and I gotten back from a trip. I think I had just gotten back from Costa Rica, maybe. I really can't remember what the situation was, but I was just sitting there and I was going to leave. And I was like, I should be thoughtful and write mom and dad a letter. So I just sat down and grabbed a piece of paper and wrote down whatever came out. But really, it was just a letter to say like how much I love my parents and how thankful I am that God blessed me with the family that I have. And my parents, this is a little bit of a backstory. So the way I grew up, my parents sacrificed everything to provide for me and my sister. So we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't want for much. We had a roof over our head. We lived in a safe neighborhood. But other than that, it was the bare bones. My mom's van, we called it Big Rolling Turd because it was this old Honda Odyssey from 1996 that like you probably you get fumes in from it. But none of that really matters. Is what I've started to learn is what my parents gave me was the opportunity to be able to do better for myself through the sacrifices they made by not getting the new car and by not doing all the things that everyone else was doing. So we didn't get to travel much, basically, is where I was going with that. Our travel budget was $0 to maybe $500 a year. So that's why we went to Chattanooga a lot. That's how I ended up here. I grew up coming here as a kid and always loved it. So I ended up moving here. But I want to take my parents to Europe. So I was just sitting there thinking about all of the amazing things that I saw when I spent a month in Europe and would love to give them that experience. And I just reflected a lot while I was in Costa Rica and thought about the different things that my parents taught me and the principles that they instilled in me and really the sacrifices that they made. Really was just laying that out, saying thank you. And I basically told them, be thinking of where you want to travel. That's always been a dream because dreams will soon be reality due to the work that I'm putting in right now. Also, please think of where you would like that you would dream to live in the next few years. There's no dream too big. I said, I've learned from the people that I surround myself with, and I will be successful. Also, please think about how you want to give back. With the success that I'm about to have, I want to give a lot. So I basically was saying again, thank you for making me the person who I am today. So that's the mindset you get in when you hang around the right people. I came back from that trip and I was like, holy crap, I'm so grateful for where I am. So thankful for this opportunity. And I will be successful and I will take my parents on vacations because that's my why. Most people, it's their family, it's their kids, whatever. I don't have any of that. I've got family, right? I've got my parents and my extended family, but I don't have kids. I don't have a girlfriend even. So what is the why? And I struggled with that for years. It's what's my why? What keeps me driven? What keeps me going? And that really became, I want to give back to my parents because they sacrificed for me. And I'm getting to experience all these things now. I want to take them with me before they get old. Like my dad's like in his 60s. So I got to hurry up because I don't want him to have his walker out or be in a wheelchair or anything like that. I want to go and enjoy the things that the world has to offer with my parents.
I love that, man. And you said a couple of things. No dream is too big. Think of where you want to go and I will be successful. Like those are a few things that stuck out to me. And yeah, you really did a good job capturing a lot of the clarity that we were seeking when we went on that trip to Costa Rica. And then the other thing is just this like idea of a public declaration. I know that you didn't post that in public. You posted that in the privacy of our group. And obviously you're kind enough to share about it on the show, but that stuff comes straight from the heart and it motivates. And the other thing you said was how to think about how you want to give back. And I think with real estate, especially when you get into commercial and self-storage and a lot of the bigger deals, the outside perception is like, hey, these are a bunch of greedy people and they're just trying to like profit off other people's, whatever the struggles they're going through. Oh, they need a storage unit because they got kicked out of their house or what. Like people jump to these crazy conclusions in their head that you can't own a self-storage facility and also be like giving back to your community. It's, I don't know, some of the way that real estate investing is perceived is hard to combat that. But I think by being open about the desire to give back and saying, hey, to your point, you had humble beginnings, but you guys had this like sense of contentment and enough that your tie as a family, the time you spent together was enough to fulfill you, whether or not you went on flashy trips to Europe or big, lavish vacations. And so I love that you have this, let me return to the center. This is where I grew up. This is what made me who I am. So let me find a way to pay that back, both literally and figuratively. So what are some ways that you want to give back, like whether it's now or in the future when you have more means?
I love to give to my church. My church home has been one of the biggest influences in my life. I go to Clear Creek Church of Christ here in Hickson, Tennessee. And when I've had some of the biggest struggles in my life, when I got fired from my W-2 for saying a lie, it was Josh, our preacher, that I leaned on and my community there. So I was going through that and trying to figure out, who am I? Who do I want to be? And my church home is always there. And we travel the world to help other people too. So I do missions in Haiti, would love to do more trips, just make that an annual thing where there's no question at all. I'm going to Haiti, no matter what the cost, no matter what the risk. I do that because my second family is there. Those are people that I love. And then really, I want to be able to see someone who's struggling and help their situation. Financially right now, I'm not really there. Like I've got a few grand set aside. And this may be a mental block too. Like I should be more giving. I think we all should be more giving. If someone is in my circle and they're like, I don't know if I'm going to make rent next month, I want to be able to just cover that $2,000 and say, hey, don't worry about it. Like this life is way too short to let that weigh on you. Go take care of your family. Like that's the kind of stuff that I want to do. And that's the reason why I want wealth. It's not for the Lamborghini. And I like my fancy watches. That's about like my only splurge, but I want to be able to share that experience with other people. And most importantly, I want to help people attain that for themselves. Because if I just am always giving it to everybody, you become the person that's, oh yeah, Hayden will just take care of it. Yeah, I want them to be able to solve the problems for themselves instead of have to lean on me. So if I can give away knowledge, or if I can give away a way for people to go and get connections and grow their business, I'd rather do it that way.
I love that. Yeah, I remember in one of the sessions we were in Costa Rica, it was the mindset session with Joe Moffat, which I've referenced a few times on this call and I've written a lot about in my newsletter. But Joe is an incredible mindset coach. And he did this exercise with us where we were really setting a clear target 10 years out in the future, what we want our life to be like. And I've done that exercise for 3 years, but it's pretty damn hard to do for 10 years.
Yeah.
But either way, he asked a bunch of these probing, challenging questions. And it was an exercise, right? It's not that you're dead set on one path for your entire life. But anyway, within that, he asked this kind of question: who do you want to be and what do you want to be doing? And you made a comment that you took the mic and asked him a question, and he asked, what do you want to be able to do? And he said, I want to be able to pick up the phone and call anybody and make anything happen. I don't know if it was any person in the world, but you wanted
to be able to solve
happen.
Any problem with a phone call.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to clarify, what do you mean by that? And do you feel like that is where you're heading?
Yes. I think that it is attainable to think that if you are a well enough connected person, any problem can be solved with a phone call or a few phone calls. You think about some of the most well-connected people in our world. If they want a building built within 2 months, they pick up a phone and they make it happen. There's work 24 hours and permits are pushed past and things like that. And that's seen as someone who's probably, oh, these rich, like you were mentioning earlier, these people that blah, blah, blah. Those are the people that build our country. Those are the people that push past the boundaries. And that's who I am and who I'm going to be in the future, is someone who pushes past boundaries and solves problems. So oftentimes some of my friends have problems of, oh, I can't get this permitting to go through, or, oh, this issue. And I'm a firm believer in the fact that if you know the right people, there's no problem unsolvable. If you're friends with the mayor and the zoning commissioner, then your zoning is probably a lot more likely to get approved. That's just the world we live in. I'm sorry, that's how it is. In Nashville, I've got a friend that got pushed the very tip top of the Airbnb registry because he's friends with the person who's over that. And that's the world that we live in, is connections get you to where you want to go. So yes, I do see, I don't know about 10 years. I think it'll probably take me longer than 10 years just because it's a little bit, my visions are very large. Maybe it'll take 20 years or whatever that may be. But I do picture one day, if I want to build a high rise in whatever city, I can just make a phone call and make the stuff happen because of the connections that I'm making today and the people who I'm being connected to.
Well, a wise young man once told me, no dream is too big. I think that sounds familiar. But no, I love that, man. And you're right. It is the world we live in, for better or for worse. Connections do create additional ability to get in front of the right people at the right time. And sometimes it makes things that are at the edge of rules. Sometimes those rules get bent a little bit depending on the situation you're in and who.
Just change the rules. You can literally, like, if you know the right people, you can just get the law changed.
Yeah.
My friend did. Got the law changed. If you know the right people, you can, anything. It doesn't matter what it is. Like, it could literally be like, it could be for good and for bad too. And you have to make it for good. And good can be in gray, right? Like, good can be good for you, but not good for somebody else. But is what you're doing going to make people's lives better or worse? That's what you have to look at. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the problem is. If it's against the law, if it's against whatever, if you know the right people, the rules can change.
I love it. We covered a lot today. We covered your background, your why, giving back, building big dreams, and just the power of connection. And I'm humbled to be able to be on this journey with you and stay connected throughout this. I think you're on a path to some amazing things. And even just in the few months I've known you, you've accomplished so much. And so I'm looking forward to having you on, and hopefully, let's say another 6 months, and you'll have probably another couple storage facilities by then, and God knows what else. But Hayden, I've loved having you on the show.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Can you give people, where can they find you? How do you want them to keep in touch with you? All that good stuff.
Yeah. So the best way to keep up with what I'm doing is at Haydyn Invest on Instagram. So it's HAYDYNINVESTS. And on that page, I've got a link to all of the different things that I do, my real estate meetup, my travel page. So I post anytime that I'm traveling somewhere about my journey. And then also the podcast page there if you want to follow me at The Art of Connecting. And then also on Facebook, Haydynn Fike. It's another easy way to find me. I check my Facebook Messenger all the time because I have to. And you can follow along with me on there as well.
Awesome. Thank you again so much for coming on the show, Hayden. And I look forward to having you back.
Yeah, absolutely. I also wanted to say too, if anyone wants to reach out to me, send me a DM. My calendar is open, as I mentioned. I'm happy to have a quick 15-minute phone call or a 30-minute meeting. Or if you want an hour-long coaching call, it's $50. We can get on the phone and I can tell you how to be a better networker.
I highly recommend that everyone listening to this takes him up on that. It will be well worth your time.
All right. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Hayden.